Thank you. Thank you very much for that reception. So I'm going to read a little bit from Field Notes on Democracy. It's really a kind of meditation about what democracy has become. And then I'm going to read from an essay I just wrote called Walking with the Comrades, because I just came back from spending a couple of weeks in the jungle with the indigenous resistance to what's going on, a war that's been announced by the Indian government. So let me just start with reading from Democracy's Failing Light. While we're still arguing about whether there's life after death, can we add another question to the cart? Is there life after democracy? What sort of life will it be? By democracy, I don't mean democracy as an ideal or an aspiration. I mean the working model, Western liberal democracy and its variants such as they are. So is there life after democracy? Attempts to answer this question often turn into a comparison of different systems of governance and end with the somewhat prickly, combative defense of democracy. It's flawed, we say. It isn't perfect, but it's better than everything else that's on offer. Inevitably, someone in the room will say, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Somalia. Is that what you would prefer? Whether democracy should be the utopia that all developing societies aspire to is a separate question altogether. Developing is in inverted commas. I think it should. The early idealistic phase can be quite heady. But the question about life after democracy is addressed to those of us who already live in democracies or in countries that pretend to be democracies. It isn't meant to suggest that we lapse into older, discredited models of totalitarian or authoritarian governance. It's meant to suggest that the system of representative democracy, too much representation and too little democracy, needs some structural adjustment. The question here really is, what have we done to democracy? What have we turned it into? What happens once democracy has been used up, when it has been hollowed out and emptied of meaning? What happens when each of its institutions has metastasized into something dangerous? What happens now that democracy and the free market have fused into a single predatory organism with a thin, constricted imagination that revolves almost entirely around the idea of maximizing profit? Is it possible to reverse this process? Can something that has mutated go back to being what it used to be? What we need today for the sake of the survival of this planet is long-term vision. Can governments whose very survival depends on immediate, extractive, short-term gain provide this? Could it be that democracy, the sacred answer to our short-term hopes and prayers, the protector of our individual freedoms, and nurturer of our avaricious dreams, will turn out to be the end game for the human race? Could it be that democracy is such a hit with modern humans precisely because it mirrors our greatest folly, our nearsightedness, our inability to live entirely in the present like most animals do, combined with our inability to see very far into the future, makes us strange in-between creatures, neither beast nor prophet. Our amazing intelligence seems to have outstripped our instinct for survival. We plunder the earth, hoping that accumulating material surplus will make up for that profound, unfathomable thing that we have lost. As a writer, a fiction writer, I've often wondered whether the attempt to always be precise, to try and get it all factually right somehow reduces the epic scale of what's really going on? Does it eventually mask a larger truth? I worry that I'm allowing myself to be railroaded into offering prosaic, factual precision, when maybe what we need is a feral howl or the transformative power and real precision of poetry. Something about the cunning, Brahmanical, intricate, bureaucratic, file-bound, applied through proper channels, nature of governance and subjugation in India seems to have made a clerk out of me. My only excuse is to say that it takes odd tools to uncover the maze of subterfuge and hypocrisy that cloaks the callousness and the cold, calculated violence of the world's favorite new superpower. Repression through proper channels sometimes engenders resistance through proper channels. As resistance goes, this isn't enough, I know, but for now it's all I have. Perhaps someday it will become the underpinning for poetry and for the feral howl. Listening to Grasshoppers, the essay from which this collection draws its subtitle, was a lecture I gave in Istanbul in January 2008 on the first anniversary of the assassination of the Armenian journalist Hrant Dink. He was shot down on the street outside his office for daring to raise a subject that is forbidden in Turkey, the 1915 genocide of Armenians, in which more than 1 million people were killed. My lecture was about the history of genocide and genocide denial and the old, almost organic relationship between progress and genocide. I've always been struck by the fact that the political party in Turkey that carried out the Armenian genocide was called the Committee for Union and Progress. Most of the essays in this collection are, in fact, about the contemporary correlation between union and progress, or in today's idiom, between nationalism and development, those unimpeachable twin towers of modern free market democracy. Both of these, in their extreme form, are, as we know now, encrypted with the potential of bringing about ultimate apocalyptic destruction, nuclear war, or climate change. But the battle for land that lies at the heart of the development debate in India. Before he became India's finance minister, P. Chidambaram was Enron's lawyer and member of the board of directors of Vedanta, a multinational mining corporation that's currently devastating the Niyamgiri hills in Orissa. Perhaps his career graph informed his worldview, or maybe it's the other way around. But in an interview last year, he said that his vision was to get 85% of India's population to live in cities. That would mean moving something like 500 million people off their lands. That process is well underway and is quickly turning India into a police state in which people who refuse to surrender their land are being made to do so at gunpoint. Perhaps this is what makes it so easy for P. Chidambaram to move so seamlessly from being finance minister to being home minister. The portfolios are separated only by an osmotic membrane. Underlying this nightmare masquerading as vision is the plan to free up vast tracts of land and all of India's natural resources, leaving them ripe for corporate plunder. In effect, to reverse the post-independence policy of land reforms. Already, forests, mountains, and water systems are being ravaged by marauding multinational corporations backed by a state that has lost its moorings and is committing what can only be called ecocide. In eastern India, bauxite and iron ore mining is destroying whole ecosystems, turning fertile land into desert. In the Himalayas, hundreds of high dams are being planned, the consequences of which can only be catastrophic. In the plains, embankments built along rivers ostensibly to control floods have led to rising riverbeds causing even more flooding, more waterlogging, more salinization of agricultural land, and the destruction of livelihoods of millions of people.